A lion on the brink of death walked up to a stranger's feet, but what happened next, no one in the world was prepared to see. I've seen a lot out here in the bush. I've seen elephants weep after losing their calves. I've seen hyenas tear into animals still breathing. I've seen humans destroy what took nature centuries to build, but nothing prepared me for that late afternoon on the Laikipia Plateau. The sun was still high, but its light was already starting to turn gold across the dry leaves. The wind blew warm, pushing red dust across the open field. I was at the observation post, sorting out some soil samples, when I heard it. It wasn't a roar. It wasn't a cry. It was a dragging sound, like something heavy struggling to move its own body. I stood up, looked out toward the open valley, and that's when I saw it. First, just a staggering shape. Then the details. Ribs sticking out, fur matted with dried blood, back legs dragging behind like they were broken. A lion, alone, injured, walking straight toward me. For a second, I froze. Not out of fear, but disbelief. This doesn't happen. Lions don't do this. They don't approach humans, especially not like this. But he kept coming, close enough that I could hear his labored breathing, and then, just a few steps from me, he collapsed. The thud was dull, muffled by the dust. He didn't faint. He gave in. It was like he said, "That's it, I'm done." I ran, yes, against every protocol, against everything they teach us about safety in the wild. I ran to him, dropped to my knees beside that massive, trembling body. And that's when something happened, something I'll never forget. He turned his head, slowly, and he looked straight into my eyes. It wasn't the look of a predator. It wasn't fear. It wasn't rage. It was human. It was a plea. Like he knew I was the only one who might help him. Like he'd already decided to trust me. I took a deep breath. My throat was dry. My hands were shaking. I reached out and touched his side gently. He didn't flinch, didn't growl, didn't move. He just let me. And in that moment, I felt the heat of his fever, the weak throb of his pulse, the scent of blood mixed with dust and desperation. I began checking his injuries. Deep bite wounds along the flank, claw marks across the back, lacerations on his paws. He looked like he'd been in a brutal fight, or attacked by a group. But what worried me most was what I felt near the base of his spine. Swelling, stiffness, possibly a spinal trauma, which would explain why he couldn't move his back legs. Night came fast. And I knew I couldn't leave him there. The hyenas were close. I could hear them. They smelled death. So I made a decision that would change my life. I ran back to the post, grabbed the emergency kit, a thermal tarp, basic meds, and my radio. And I spent the night beside a dying lion. Every hour I checked his vitals, administered antibiotics, rehydration, monitored his breathing. When the cold of the night settled in, I covered him with the tarp, kept a small fire burning nearby, and left my flashlight on. And the most incredible thing, he never tried to get away, never growled. He just accepted it, in silence, as if he understood that his life was now in someone else's hands. Sometime in the middle of the night I heard something creeping, soft steps, breathing. I knew what it was. I stood slowly, flashlight raised. Hyenas. 2, then 4, circling. And there I was, alone, between them and a helpless lion. I grabbed the shock baton, yelled, hit the ground hard. They backed off, but they didn't leave. Only the sunrise chased them away. When morning came, he was still alive, eyes half open, breathing stronger, and that's when I made my vow. I would not let him die. I called for an aerial rescue, told them everything. Lone lion, wounded, might survive. Urgent medevac request. Hours later, I heard it, the chopper, and with the help of 2 local rangers, we carefully lifted him onto a makeshift stretcher. I climbed into the helicopter with him, holding the IV in one hand and his front paw in the other. During the entire flight, he stayed calm, and at one point he rested his nose gently against my arm, like he was saying, "Thank you." When we landed at the veterinary clinic in Nanyuki, the team was waiting. Initial scans confirmed it all: spinal trauma, severe malnutrition, multiple infections. The odds? Almost zero. But I insisted, and they agreed to try. The lion was given a name, Jabari. It means brave one in Swahili. And that first night, I stood outside looking at his silhouette through the clinic window, surrounded by machines and tubes, and I asked myself, why did he choose me? Tell me in the comments what city or country you're watching this from. And if this story has already touched your heart, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like and share. Because when we spread stories like this, we spread empathy, hope, and humanity. It's strange to say this, but something about that night changed the way I see life. When you spend an entire night beside a wounded lion, not knowing if he'll still be breathing when the sun comes up, your soul starts to think differently. Death stops being theory. Silence becomes language, and time slows down. Jabari stayed at the clinic for weeks. Those first days were the hardest. He couldn't stand. The infection had spread too fast. The veterinary team worked non-stop, but whenever I asked about his chances, nobody wanted to answer. Some said he should be put down, that it would be more humane. But I couldn't accept that, because every time I got close, he still opened his eyes, and every time we looked at each other, there was life in there. I remember the third day. Light rain was falling over Nanyuki. The sky was grey. I was leaning against the clinic doorway, exhausted, heart heavy. I walked in, slowly. Jabari was lying still, hooked to fluids. When he saw me, his eyes moved, slowly, but they moved. And then he did something that shattered me. He tried to lift his head. He couldn't, but he tried. And in that moment, I understood. He wanted to keep going. He hadn't given up. That was the day I decided waiting wasn't enough. I started helping directly with an improvised kind of therapy. We needed to stimulate his muscles, massage his spine, move his legs gently. And believe it or not, Jabari allowed it, never attacked, never pulled away. He just looked at me, calm, as if he knew that pain was part of coming back to life. The vet started calling me the Lion Man. Soon, I was part of his treatment. I talked to him every day, told him what was happening outside, gave updates on the other animals, talked about the reserve. It might sound silly, but it felt like Jabari listened, like every word echoed somewhere deep inside him. And I swear, sometimes he would close his eyes as if he understood, as if he was saying, "Thank you." Then, the first movement, almost a month after he'd arrived. I was cleaning around his stall when I heard it. A faint scraping sound. I turned and saw it. His front paw had dragged a few inches. It wasn't a spasm, it was effort. He was coming back, slowly, like he was learning his body again. In the days that followed, the movements continued. Slow, painful, but real. He managed to lift his upper body. His head no longer sagged, and then came the first attempt to stand. He wobbled, collapsed, but he tried. When I looked into his eyes that day, I saw something I can't explain. It wasn't physical strength. It was a choice. Jabari chose to live, and then something unexpected happened. A group of young locals showed up at the clinic with a story. They said they had seen a small pride of lions wandering near the Ewaso Ngiro River. No leader, no direction. 3 females, 2 cubs. They claimed the dominant male had been killed by poachers a few weeks earlier. The group was lost. I stood there, silent. It all made too much sense. What if Jabari was that missing alpha? What if he'd been attacked trying to defend them? And somehow, injured, he escaped. Not to hide, but to find help. The theory fit. And deep down, I knew. That lion didn't show up at my outpost by accident. He ran, he fought, he survived, and he came to me, not out of weakness, but out of instinct. That changed everything. It wasn't just about healing Jabari anymore. It was about what would come after. If he could stand again, if he could roar again, what would he do? The next morning, I got to the clinic early, and when I walked into the room, he was standing, shaky, but upright, his front legs steady, his back legs wobbly, but holding. And he was staring at me. I cried, for the first time in years, because that wasn't just an animal standing up, it was hope on 4 legs. It was courage made visible. The staff was silent. No one could believe it. I dropped to my knees in front of him, slowly, lowered my hand in respect. Jabari took 2 steps, slow, strong. He came closer and stopped just inches from my face, his head low, his eyes calm. And in that moment I understood. He wasn't a patient anymore. He was a survivor. That night, back in my cabin, I sat under the stars, and that question that had followed me since day one came back again. Why me? Why did he come to me? And in the stillness, I had my answer. It wasn't an accident. It was a choice. He saw something in me that I hadn't seen in myself. The day Jabari walked across the enclosure without collapsing, no one said a word. We just watched. You could hear his paws brushing the dirt, the soft huff of his breath, the creaking of his joints. But what made everyone hold their breath was the way he moved, with purpose. Not like an animal stumbling back to life, like a king, remembering who he was. By then, Jabari had already captured the hearts of the whole clinic. The vets stopped betting against him. The interns came early just to sit by the fence and watch him rest. Even the most skeptical among us, the ones who thought we should have let nature take its course, had softened, because what we were witnessing wasn't just a recovery, it was a resurrection. But I couldn't stop thinking about the pride, the displaced lions near the Ewaso River. I couldn't stop wondering if they were still out there, waiting, surviving, grieving the one who never came back. So 2 weeks later, I returned to the field. With binoculars, a tracking drone, and a quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, we'd find them. And we did. 3 lionesses, 2 cubs, thin, restless, moving constantly. They looked lost, like they didn't belong anywhere. I watched them for hours. They took turns watching the perimeter, moved without coordination, no roars, no rest, no rhythm. And I knew. That was them. That was his pride. But I didn't act yet. I needed to know Jabari was ready. So I returned to the clinic, and when I walked up to the enclosure that afternoon, something stopped me cold. Jabari was pacing, not limping, not dragging, pacing, back and forth, eyes alert, nose to the air, like he knew something was happening. I stood there for a long time just watching, and then I opened the gate. He didn't rush out, didn't roar. He just stepped into the open, slowly, like every muscle was remembering the weight of leadership. And then he looked back at me, one long look, and turned toward the wild. For 2 days we followed him, not too close, not interfering. He moved with instinct, resting only in shade, drinking from hidden streams, pausing often to smell the wind. And then it happened. We had just set up camp when I heard it, a low sound deep in the chest, a rumble, like thunder in slow motion. Jabari was calling, not just any call, a territorial roar, the kind that carries for miles, the kind that says, "I'm back." And somewhere out there the reply came, shorter, higher, a female, then 2 more, then silence. We didn't sleep that night. We waited. Somewhere deep in the dark, something was shifting. By sunrise we saw the first shadow on the ridge, 1 lioness, then another. And then the 2 cubs trailing behind. They didn't rush him, they didn't run, they walked, slow, careful, like approaching something sacred. Jabari stood tall, still, not a sound, until the first lioness reached him. She circled once, then touched her head to his chest. The other 2 followed. No growling, no hesitation, only recognition. And then, right in front of us, the pride lay down together, Jabari in the center, The cubs curled beside him. One of them licked his paw, and I stood there holding back tears, because that was a reunion the world wasn't supposed to witness. A lion who came back from the brink of death, to take back his place, to protect what was his. And more than that, to remember. People ask me all the time, but animals don't feel that, do they? And I tell them this: you didn't see what I saw. You didn't see the moment a cub looked up at his father like he had just come home from war. You didn't see the lioness rest her head on his shoulder like she never thought she'd do it again. You didn't feel the silence, the sacredness of it all. You didn't see him remember. I thought that was the end of the story. That Jabari would return to the wild, that the pride would accept him, and nature would take its course again. But I was wrong. Something happened weeks later that I still can't explain. Something that didn't just shock me, it shocked the world. After the reunion, Jabari and the pride settled near the northern edge of the reserve, far enough from human activity to be safe, but close enough for us to monitor discreetly. I visited now and then, not to interfere, just to watch. From a distance, with binoculars, I'd see him lying under the acacia trees, cubs climbing over his back, the lionesses grooming each other. A new rhythm had returned, a sense of order. Then came the dry spell. Weeks without rain, rivers thinned. Prey moved away, tensions rose across the savannah, poachers became more aggressive, and rangers reported strange traps being set near protected zones. One morning we found the body of a young male lion, snared and shot just outside the boundary line. It was a message, a threat, and the reserve held its breath. That night, I returned to my outpost. The air was dry, silent, heavy. I remember standing on the wooden platform looking across the plain, and then I saw them, eyes glowing in the dark, first 2, then 5, then more. Hyenas, dozens, moving in packs, restless and bold. It wasn't normal. They were too close, too many. Like they knew something we didn't. And that's when I heard it, a sound I hadn't heard in weeks, a low growl, deep, slow, and steady. I turned my head and froze. Jabari was there. He had come back, alone, not limping, not weak. Standing at the edge of the outpost clearing, his mane darker now, eyes glowing amber in the moonlight. He looked straight at me, no fear, no hesitation, just presence. I took a slow step forward. He didn't move. I took another. Still nothing. And then I stopped, because something shifted. Behind him, just on the edge of the trees, shapes, moving, the lionesses, the cubs, they were there, all of them. He hadn't come alone, he had brought them. And I understood, this wasn't a visit, it was a stand. The hyenas crept closer, circling, watching, testing the ground. One of them growled, a high-pitched challenge. Jabari stepped forward, just one pace, shoulders square, body low, a deep snarl building in his chest. And then, without warning, he roared, not a warning, a declaration, a sound so thunderous it echoed across the plain and into my chest. And in that moment, something ancient came alive. The hyenas froze, one whimpered and backed away, the others hesitated. Jabari didn't move. The pride lined up behind him like shadows cast by a single flame. They didn't attack. They didn't need to. Presence was enough. I watched from the platform, hands gripping the rail, heart pounding. I wasn't just witnessing nature. I was witnessing something closer to memory, to loyalty, to language. And for the second time in my life, I asked myself the question I thought had been answered already. Why me? Why did he come to me in the first place? And why come back now? The hyenas scattered slowly, fading into the tall grass. Jabari turned his head slightly in my direction, just for a second. Then he walked to the edge of the clearing, lay down beside the cubs, and rested his head on the ground. The pride followed. One by one they curled around him in silence. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed outside until dawn, listening to the breath of lions less than 20 meters away, listening to the quiet. When morning came, they were gone, not a sound, not a track, like spirits. Later that day, a ranger brought me a photo from one of the motion sensor cameras set up along the reserve border. It showed Jabari, standing side by side with me, both of us facing the same direction. It wasn't staged, it wasn't planned, it just happened. The photo was raw, unedited, but something about it didn't feel like a moment. It felt like a message, and when we posted it online, the response was unlike anything we'd seen. Millions of views, messages from every continent. People crying, sharing their own stories. Not about lions, but about loyalty, about second chances, about what it means to stand beside someone when it matters. Experts called it an example of interspecies memory. Others called it myth. But those who saw it, really saw it, understood something deeper. Sometimes the wild doesn't forget. Sometimes when the world looks away, nature remembers. And sometimes a lion comes back to remind you that trust, once given, never truly leaves. It began with a call I almost ignored. Just after sunrise, radio static crackled through the receiver on my desk. A young ranger's voice came through, breathless, urgent. "You need to come to the valley, now. Bring a camera if you can." I grabbed my pack and didn't ask questions. In this line of work, when someone says now, you move. By the time I reached the ridge above the valley floor, I saw them. Jabari and his pride, not hunting, not resting, standing completely still. They had gathered near a fallen acacia, the cubs sitting close together, the lionesses scanning the distance, and Jabari, he was staring up, not at me, but at the sky. At first I didn't understand. Then I heard it. The low hum. A helicopter. Not ours. Not scheduled. I radioed in. No flights authorized that morning, which meant one thing. Poachers. Likely scouting. Maybe armed. Maybe worse. The same men who had once nearly killed Jabari could be watching him now from above, thinking he was just another trophy waiting. My heart pounded. I felt helpless. We didn't have aerial defense. No rapid deployment team nearby. Just me and them. I looked down at Jabari, unsure what would happen next, but then he moved. He didn't run, didn't hide. He walked, slowly, calmly, toward the open space, toward the noise. He stood at the center of the field and looked up. And then something impossible happened. He roared once, twice, louder than I'd ever heard before. And from the hill behind me, I heard more roars, coming from other lions in distant territories, a chorus, a declaration, as if the entire land had decided to answer. The sound echoed across the valley, and the helicopter, hovering just above the treetops, turned sharply and vanished into the clouds. The pride didn't move, no panic, no retreat, only stillness, only unity. Jabari turned, walked back to his family, and lay down at their center. And it hit me. He wasn't roaring to challenge, he was warning, not just for his pride, but for every creature nearby, as if saying, "This land is not abandoned. I remember, and I protect it now." That afternoon, a drone team from a wildlife NGO arrived to investigate the unauthorized flight. One of the operators noticed movement near the river and sent the drone lower. What they captured became the most shared wildlife video of that year. The footage showed me, kneeling beside Jabari, not planned, not staged. He had walked up to me just minutes earlier, eyes soft, tail swaying lazily. I had dropped to my knees out of habit, something I'd done since his early recovery, and he had come close, brushing his head lightly against my shoulder, just once, then sitting beside me, calm, breathing steady. The camera captured the whole moment, a man and a lion, sitting side by side in perfect peace. No chains, no cages, just connection. The world reacted instantly. News outlets ran headlines like "The Lion That Came Back" and "Proof of Memory in the Wild." Some called it a miracle, others tried to explain it away with science, but the people who felt it, people from villages, cities, war zones, hospitals, they didn't care what it was. They saw something honest, something lost, something we're all searching for, the hope that even after pain, even after betrayal, trust can be rebuilt. That moment changed everything. Jabari's story became a symbol. Schools taught it. Documentaries aired it, conservation donations surged across East Africa. And more than that, people started believing again, not just in animals, but in redemption, in loyalty, in the fact that some bonds, even silent ones, don't break with time. They deepen. I still live in Laikipia. The outpost is quieter now. The pride roams deeper into the reserve, far from human eyes. I haven't seen Jabari in over a year, but every so often I find tracks near the edge of the camp. Large, deep, familiar. And once, just once, I found something else. A carcass of an antelope, untouched, lying close to the observation platform. Almost like an offering, a gift, a message I didn't need words to understand. People ask if I miss him. I tell them the truth. He's not gone. He's part of this land now, and I carry him in every step I take through this place, in every sound I hear in the night, in every moment of stillness before the dawn. Because once a lion looks into your eyes, you're never the same again. And if you're lucky, truly lucky, he might come back to remind you that you mattered too.